All right, folks, it's time to go around the NFL and see what's happening. The game is over now, and let me tell you, Monday night game is what I mean to say. It's long over now. And let me tell you, I had a terrible week prediction wise. I made a lot of, I was 8-4 last week, was feeling pretty good. This week, I just took a straight nosedive, way down. Just everything, so much of what I said in last week's preview, or on Saturday. I think it was Saturday I made the preview. So much of what I said on Saturday's preview was so off base. It can't be right all the time. A lot of surprising outcomes this weekend. So disappointing for sure. But let's just get into it. Let's get to the scores and talk about each game here. First off, no, wait, I'm looking at the wrong week here. That's not 18. Okay. So I believe I already talked about these games around Christmas time that sucked ass. They were no good. I think, yeah, I was just previewing Texans, Chargers, and Ravens, Packers. Let's start with Texans, Chargers. I was right about this one. That's 1-0 for the week. It starts off well. It goes in the completely wrong direction after this one. As I thought, the Texans defense was too much for the Chargers to handle. Fortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, Herbert didn't get hurt. No one else got seriously injured as far as I could tell. I didn't hear about any major injuries. I was a little worried that the Texans pass rush was going to put somebody on the IR. I don't think that did happen. I was shocked at how, I was like, I got to the game a little bit late. I turned it on, and the Texans were up 14-0, and it was just kind of like, the Texans supposed to have crappy offense. It was disappointing right off the bat because we were rooting for the Chargers as Pats fans, so that the Chargers would have a chance to play for the division title in their last game of the year, and that's gone. Texans come down hard on them. I didn't see the whole game. I was kind of half watching and half watching something else. It just looked like the Chargers couldn't really put together any kind of sustained drive against that Texans defense. And again, I still think the Texans. I'm worried about I mentioned in the last video I made about the reviewing the Pats Jets game. Texans are a tough cookie. They are not going to be an easy team to beat. C.J. Stroud, 16 for 28, 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. You don't need C.J. Stroud to be an elite quarterback. You just need him to do that. 16 for 28, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. If the Texans D is playing as well as it can, then that's good enough for the Texans to win a game in the playoffs. So definitely scary. Texans winning this game threw a lot of the playoff seeding that I was hoping for into disarray. So that's disappointing to start. Apparently, I guess next week the Texans play the Colts. I think they said that Philip Rivers won't be playing next week. He did end up playing against Jacksonville. I have no idea why. I guess he just figured. I don't know. I don't know why he either wouldn't finish the season or quit. Instead, he played one game against Jacksonville, and he's not going to play the next game against the Texans. Maybe he just doesn't want to get his ass handed to him by the Texans. Will Anderson, the Texans pass rush. Maybe that's why he's stepping away. But the Texans are going to crush the Colts. I don't know. I mean, all right. Well, that's for next. I shouldn't even say that. That's for the next week preview. This is a review. We'll wait till the preview to talk about that. And certainly, I could say that I think they're going to crush the Colts, but I've been wrong about a lot. But anyway, I was right about this one. Texans beat the Chargers, and the Chargers, meanwhile, I think they said Herbert has a messed up hand. He's not going to play against Denver. So much for us getting the 1 seed. Very disappointing. Anyway, I won't talk about that now. I'll just say that this one went more or less as I expected. Great defensive performance from the Texans. Chargers couldn't really get anything going, and And that was that. When I made that prediction, I didn't want it to be right, but what do you know, it was. All right, Ravens Packers. This was a surprise. In my mind, I just thought Tyler Huntley, how good can he possibly be? I thought the Green Bay defense, even though it wasn't great, it didn't look great without Micah Parsons. I thought, well, there must still be. Maybe I'm just putting too much and giving Micah Parsons too much credit. There's probably still some decent defenders in that Packers team, and it does seem like Micah Parsons was a key piece because Packers did not look good. Could not stop Derrick Henry. 41 points. This is the same team that I thought the Packers were better when they won on Thanksgiving against the Lions because the Lions were supposedly a high-power offense, and the Packers looked dominant in that game. So I guess I assumed that the defense was better than it ended up being. But the Packers defense doesn't look so scary with Parsons gone, and they're going to be one and down. They're not easily. I wouldn't say they're the worst NFC team. That'll go to that awful, what is it, the South, I guess, or whatever that conference is with Tampa and Carolina. That one somehow. The fact that you even have the Packers and one of those two god awful teams in this playoff is, I guess that's just how it goes. But they're gonna have to work on keeping divisions from getting that lopsided. To have some be so great and some be so terrible. It means you end up having to watch teams that have no business being in the playoffs, and that's a little disappointing. But Malik Willis looked really good. A lot of people are saying he's going to get a contract next year. It'll be interesting to see. People are speculating on where he was going to land from Green Bay. This is kind of looking forward. I'm just kind of intrigued by it because he played so well. He really looked good. I don't know, 18 for 21, 288 yards and a touchdown. That's solid, Ravens don't have the greatest defense, but this guy seems like the best backup quarterback in the league. I was thinking, some people were saying that Pittsburgh would be a good place for him to go. I don't think Pittsburgh has the greatest. They'd have to add a wide receiver or two to make it more interesting. I feel like I could see him going to Minnesota and achieving a lot. They were able to make Darnold work in Minnesota. Maybe they could get Willis to work, or maybe he could go to. The Falcons have some weapons. He could be interesting with the Falcons, unless they run back Kirk Cousins again next year. But I'm intrigued to see Malik Willis be a starting quarterback next year. So, he looks so good as a backup. You really wonder if he can be sort of a premier guy. Maybe premier is a strong word. I'd say at best he could probably end up being a second-tier guy. I don't think he's ever going to be elite, but 18 for 21, 288 yards, a touchdown, and plus a guy who can run a little bit. He's exciting. He's a fun player. It'd be good to see him help a team that I don't hate. But yeah, the Ravens dominated this one. I really thought the Ravens were going to be sort of on the side of giving up, feeling like, oh well, in my mind the Ravens were going to look at the Pittsburgh playing Cleveland and think, oh, what are the chances that they win that game? And the Ravens just didn't look very good against the. Well, they actually did look pretty good against the Pats for a lot of that game, but they just sort of seemed to, lose their mind at the end of that game. Somehow the Pats just came and put them away. But they just look like a strong team in this game, the Ravens. And now there's talk of Lamar Jackson coming back before their final matchup. I have no doubt in my mind that the Ravens will beat the Steelers, but again, I shouldn't talk about that yet. We'll save that for next week's preview. But certainly, the Ravens seem like a playoff team to me at this point. And the Packers, they look like they're limping into the playoffs, and it won't be long for them. Sad year for Packers fans. Sorry. I should mention Derrick Henry, by the way. 216 yards and 4 touchdowns. This guy is, one of the greatest running backs that we'll ever see. Just has done it with different teams. I thought he was getting old. It doesn't seem like he's getting old. Wouldn't mind it if, Patriots considered trading for Derrick Henry next year, but get 1 year of a great. I'm sure next year won't be as good of a year for him because he's starting to get to that age range where he's going to be less effective. but I wouldn't mind seeing Derrick Henry on the team 1 year anyway. He's an old enough guy. You could probably get him in a trade without having to give up the farm for him. But yeah, Derrick Henry. I guess you don't feel as bad about him gashing the Patriots after he did the same thing to the Packers. And the Packers defense is supposed to be better than the Patriots, but you wouldn't know it from watching this game. Yeah, it wasn't much of a game to watch. And also Huntley, I didn't give Huntley enough credit. He's not a great backup, but he's certainly capable. And if they do go with Huntley over Lamar in that next game, he's shown that with Derrick Henry, as long as Derrick Henry leads the charge, as long as Huntley can sort of just be adequate and acquit himself well enough, the Ravens are pretty solid even without Lamar Jackson. I don't think they're going to make any kind of a playoff run without Lamar Jackson. I think they need Lamar Jackson to get anywhere. But, at the very least, they should be able to handle Pittsburgh next week. But we won't talk about that till next week. Moving on. Bengals, Cardinals. This is one I got right. I said that I thought that they had bounced back and that they were going to make more noise now, and they did cover the spread 37-14. I don't know what's going on with Joe Burrow. Very kind of random. I don't know what happened in that Baltimore game. Baltimore's defense sucked. Somehow they shut them out, and then the Bengals come out. Let's see, what was their last two? I have to remember. I seem to think they've won the last two, haven't they? Let's see. They crushed the Dolphins. They crushed the Cardinals. It's looking like the Bengals offense we were expecting to see at the beginning of the year if Burrow had been healthy. So it's a shame for the Bengals. I don't hate the Bengals because they just I feel for any team who has never won the championship, never won a Lombardi. And Bengals fans almost got there. They looked pretty good against the Rams in that Super Bowl. They had a shot to win that Super Bowl. I like Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are fun to watch. I don't know if they're going to be coming back next year, but all the Bengals need to do is make their defensive unit mediocre, and that the offense they have between Chad Brown and Joe Burrow and Chase and Higgins, they could be an exciting team if they just had a mediocre defense. But I'm glad we didn't have to deal with them too much this year, and they weren't a problem for the Pats this year at the very least. A little bit of a problem, I guess, but we lost some key players against them. That was the worst part about playing them. But yeah, they crushed the Cardinals, so I got that one right. So let's see, where am I at? I forgot to mention. So let's see, I was 1-0 with the Texans. Then I picked the Packers and the Ravens Packers, so I was totally off on that. I really thought the Packers were going to bring it more, but I did not realize how motivated the Ravens would be, and I didn't realize how well they would play without Lamar Jackson in there. They did not. I guess I underestimated Derrick Henry. So that was 1-1, and I was 2-1. The Bengals. Here's where it really takes a turn. Steelers, Browns. I don't really have much to say about the Cardinals. They stink. Hopefully, for their sake, they get better next year. I don't have anything else to say about the Cardinals, though. They're not really worth talking about. Browns, Steelers. This game is shocking. It's just shocking that the Steelers could not figure out a way to beat a team with 3 wins. I mean, they were saying that I guess there were too many straight routes, that they weren't being very creative, but the offensive coordinator wasn't being very creative. Shedeur Sanders had a decent game, but nothing to write home about. I know you don't have DK Metcalf, and he's a big part of your offense, but man, they must not have much of a game plan without Metcalf if they can only score 6 points against the Browns. It's just, I didn't even watch most of that game. I was mostly watching the Pats demolish the Jets. But I would sneak back to it, here and there. In the second half, there wasn't much to see anymore. They were just running the clock out in the Pats-Jets game. And it just, I didn't see any kind of offense out of the Steelers till that last drive. And it seemed like they were moving the ball pretty well. And then whatever got them down the field, they either abandoned or their red zone offense stunk because I just saw them blow play after play in the end zone. And, the Steelers, I mean, Aaron Rodgers should be ashamed of himself. Entire Steelers organization, Mike Tomlin should be ashamed of himself. You can't beat the Browns to keep the Ravens out of the playoffs. I was really hoping to keep the Ravens out of the playoffs because they could be a problem for the Pats, just like all the other teams in the playoffs, especially if Lamar Jackson comes back and suddenly looks healthier. And the Steelers couldn't even. They had a chance to control their own destiny, and they just blew it. They just blew it. It was a terrible, terrible game. Steelers are a joke of an organization for the last ever since, pretty much ever since the Brady Belichick dynasty started. They've never been scary. The only time they ever won was when Brady was out for the year. Um, you know, Tomlin is what he is. He's kind of a McDermott type. He can make the team decent, but you can't really get him over the hump against any kind of really decent competition. They'll probably finish 9-8, which is the joke that they always finish with 9 or 10 wins every single year. Nothing's going to change. This is not a way to build a team that improves. They're going with. They got to stop going. Aaron Rodgers should just quit. He's no longer a quarterback that's exciting to watch or interesting. His story is over. The Steelers would be smart to move on from him. Steelers, if they got Malik Willis, might be somewhat interesting next year, but I fully expect them to shit the bed on this season by getting probably. I'm gonna say that they're gonna get pretty well whomped by Baltimore. We'll see. I mean, I'd be surprised if Baltimore was able to run up the score on Green Bay and then couldn't do anything to the Steelers, who I see as being worse than Green Bay. So, yeah. Not an impressive game. I know that for the Browns, Amir Garrett was unable to get his record-setting sack. Let's see. Does he have a chance to do it next week, or are they off next week? No, there's no bye this late in the year, so they're definitely playing somebody. They'll be playing. They got the Bengals, so see if Joe Burrow ends up being the victim of the sack record. That's about the only thing worth paying attention to, I suppose. Shador. The Cleveland Browns have a hard time. We're gonna have a hard time deciding what to do with Kevin Stefanski and Shador Sanders. I'm of the opinion that if they can't get, it seems like Mendoza's the only really strong quarterback candidate in this next draft. If I was Cleveland, I'd probably continue to build the rest of the team and give Sanders another year. I don't know if I'd give Stefanski another year. That guy seems like a loser. I don't know if they have many better options. They've played better near the end of the year, but you know, I don't think you can give Stefanski a lot of credit for a 4-12 record. Of course, they've started to look better since Shador has been the guy. So I don't know. Maybe they give Stefanski another chance. I think if I was the Browns and there was another head coaching candidate that I liked better, I would keep Shador, make him not draft a quarterback unless there was somebody who was really intriguing that you liked. Build the rest of the team and wait until a stronger quarterback draft comes along in the future. It seems to me like if you don't get Mendoza, you're not really getting anyone special in this next draft. But we'll see. I don't really know. Some people have said DJ Moore. I don't know much about him. I don't know enough about college football to tell you. But for now, the Browns are still a pretty boring organization, and I probably shouldn't spend this much time talking about them either. Saints do crush the Titans. I was right about this one. I did pick the Steelers in that game, by the way, so that was a loss. Where does that put me at it? Before I move on, I should keep a record of where I'm at. So it was. I'm at 2-2 now. Yeah, it gets uglier from here. Although, well, not entirely, because I called this one. Saints beat the Titans. I believe they covered the spread. That makes me 3-2. Tyler Shuck continues to look like maybe the offensive rookie. They're saying he's the rookie of the year now. They were talking about maybe it being Travion, and it sounds like the Travion talk has faded away. I guess this award obviously usually does go to a quarterback. There's no reason to say why this guy, 22 for 27, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, man, did they find a diamond in the rough with this guy potentially? I know they're playing the Titans, so it wasn't like he was going up against a killer defense. But there's not much else to say about this game. Saints seem to be on a better track now. I think that they'll be a team that has a shot to graze the playoffs next year. They probably won't be a contender, but they if they're lucky, they'll. Obviously, I thought that the Pats weren't going to do much this year, and so they climbed to be at least probably the second or third seed, depending on whether they beat Miami or not. I guess there's always a chance if the Saints make the right moves, they could be relevant next year, but we'll see. Certainly I feel better about them next year than I do about the Titans. I think Kellen Moore might be a decent coach, so 6-10, not bad for a team that didn't find its Didn't give a chance to its Rookie of the Year quarterback till halfway through the season. So things looking up for the Saints. On the other side of it, real quick, I'm going to take a look at the stats for Cam Ward because I didn't realize he was a 0-star recruit. It's a pretty cool story. The guy worked his ass off. 21 of 40 for 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Not bad, not great. Certainly the completion percentage could use a bump. He did manage to score 26 points anyway, so we'll see if the Titans improve. But there's not much else to say about this game. The Jaguars, Colts. So let's see, I was 3-2 with the Saints win, but then Jaguars, Colts. I'm trying to remember what the spread was in this game. I don't even remember who. I think I took the Jaguars. Let's see. I'm pretty sure I thought, yeah. Colts. What was it? Let's see. 5.5. Did I win this one or not? 5.5. I guess I did. The Jaguars came away with a 6-point win, and I think I did take the Jaguars. Yep. So all right, I'm 4-2. Not quite as bad as I thought. I barely watched this game. I assumed it would be an easier game than it was because I thought Philip Rivers wasn't playing. Philip Rivers still ended up having a half decent game, but he's old. As good as he's been playing for a guy of his age, he's definitely not a guy who has any reason to stay around anymore. So I think it's better that he rides off in the sunset at this point, even though it was a nice little story, him coming back. And it was a shame he couldn't have made it more of a story by winning a game or two, but I'm not a fan of the Colts anyway, so I didn't really care too much. Trevor Lawrence, 23 for 37, 263 yards, and one interception. It just says no touchdowns, I guess. Not a great game. I'm still really not a big believer in Trevor Lawrence. This is the biggest reason why I don't see the Jaguars as a serious threat in the playoffs. I will not be afraid of the Jaguars if it's the Pats versus the Jaguars. And they didn't look so great in this game against the Colts team that I guess is, 8-8, so they're not terrible, but they're not good. And the Colts, wrapping it up, they'll probably finish with a losing record when they play the Texans next week. So, not much I can say about the Colts. They're going to try to run it back with Dan Jones next year, and as I said, I don't know how that's going to work, but I got that one right. So let's see. That makes me, one more time, I hate to keep going back and doing this, but so that made me, let's see. So that was 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. So I was 4-2 at this point. It's only going to get worse from here. I know I'm about to hit the rough stretch because I know I finished well under 500. But 4-2, not a bad start until you look at Buccaneers Dolphins, and I am just the Buccaneers, the way they've fallen on their face as the end of this year. I don't get it. It was like coming into this year, people thought Baker Mayfield was pretty good. The Buccaneers had been a good team the last few years. They looked so great at the beginning of the year, and then they had injury problems. You just sort of assumed that when everyone come back that they would go back to being the force that they were earlier in the year, and it just has not happened. I mean, Baker Mayfield, you can't complain about these stats. 33 for 44, 346 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's actually great numbers. So why did they lose this game? I don't get it. It's like Achane didn't even run for 100 yards. I think Ewers ended up having a good game in this one, which makes me think we really have to worry about, 14 for 22, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a pretty good rating. I mean, that's not a bad game at all, but I just don't see, must have been, I didn't watch this game. It must have been some turnovers or pick sixes or something. I don't really see how Tampa Bay lost this game. 114 yards receiving for Jalen McMillan, 108 for Godwin. Bucky Irving, well, this is part of the problem. He only rushed for 19 yards on 9 carries, so that's not very good. I don't know. I wonder if I should be worried about the Dolphins against the Pats next week. They're I don't know why they're playing for Mike McDonald, or people are saying should be fired. I don't know if he should be fired. Mike McDonald never really got a chance with a great quarterback. Tua is okay, but I don't know how many people really think he's a lot of people I don't think ever bought into Tua as the Dolphins franchise quarterback. He's not bad, but he's not great. I don't even think he's a second-tier quarterback. I'd put him in the third tier. And, the Buccaneers, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. There's so much talent on that team. Must be bad coaching. It's the only thing I could see. They got a lot of names on offense that look pretty good. Their defense isn't the most fantastic in the world, but they only gave up 20 points. I mean, they should have been able to score more than 20 points. It's strange. Well, anyway, either way, I missed that one. I picked the Bucks to win that game and cover, so, and it wasn't even close. So that makes me 4-3 in the beginning of the downslide. Buccaneers will go on to take the Panthers next week. I don't know what to think. I'll talk about that next week. Let's just continue. We got Pats Jets. I got that one wrong too. Thought the Pats wouldn't cover with 7 guys injured or whatever it was. There's a lot of guys on the injury report, and the Jets are so bad. I had no idea the Jets were quite that bad. Patriots rolled. Fun game to watch, at least in the first half. The second half was a total snooze fest. Fun watching Drake May looking like the best version of himself. I already talked plenty about that game on my last video. If you want me to hear me talk about the Patriots, I talk about it for an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm not going to say anything else about that game except I was wrong, and so that makes it 4-4. I'm back at 500, and it's only getting worse from there. Panthers Seahawks. I really thought that the Panthers were at least a half-decent team, and I thought they'd be motivated to at least make this a game. Darnold, 18 for 27, 147 yards and a touchdown. If you told me that Darnold would be 18 for 27 with 147 yards and a touchdown, I'd say the Panthers at least make that a game. But I suppose the issue here was just Bryce Young. I mean, Bryce Young, 14 for 24, 54 yards. And that is the issue right there. Plus their rushing leaves a lot to be desired. 59 yards for Dowdle on 12 carries is not terrible, but it's like if Bryce Young threw for 54 yards and their top running back ran for 59 yards, then obviously they weren't able to generate much offense. I guess that Seahawks defense, I shouldn't be shocked that they shut them down. It is one of the best defenses in the NFL. And it's funny how the Seahawks managed to win without, I think they had 100 yards from Charbonnet, if I remember correctly. So for them, it was more the rushing game that was successful. But I thought that, there it is, 110 yards for Charbonnet. Also, 51 more from Kenneth Walker. But what really surprised me was I thought the defense for the Panthers was better than this. That's why I thought it would be a game. But the Seahawks dominated. Wasn't even close. Seahawks are looking. This will be interesting to watch them play the 49ers next week. I think I'm leaning Seahawks, but I'll make a decision when I do the preview. But surprise, surprise, Seahawks look as good as they have most of the year, and that put me at 4-5. I believe this is where I go under 500. Okay. Moving on, the Giants and the Raiders. I just thought because the Raiders were at home, they seemed like two teams that both sucked. I figured the Raiders were at home. They have more talent that I know about. I mean, that's not to say that the Giants don't have talent. Dart, 22 for 30, 207 yards. Nothing really that exciting there. Let's take a look at the box score on this one here. See what's going on. What was there? We got Geno Smith. Poor Geno Smith. I really thought he was going to, he was one of those second chance quarterbacks that seemed like he was working out, and then this year happened, and now it's like he's gone back to being the guy who nobody's going to want. I don't think Geno Smith even has a starter's job next year necessarily. It's for a team that's very desperate or sees something in him that can be fixed. Looks like Kenny Pickett threw for some period of time. I don't know why. I mean, 20 for 28, it's actually pretty good completion per attempt, but only 176 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Maybe just too many picks in this game. That might have been the biggest reason why Las Vegas got owned. Some decent running. Nothing. Ginty goes back to only rushing for 60 yards. 3.8 average. It looks like the Vegas needs to improve their offensive line. And then you got Wan'Dale Robinson, 113 yards. I don't even see much on this side. I suppose. What about their tight end? I suppose I didn't realize that what's his name, Bowers, was out again. Maybe that was part of the issue. I don't know. I don't. These scores are very weird today. Like why did the Giants dominate? Was it just the picks? Maybe it was just the picks from Geno. I don't know. But Giants fans had to be a little bit disappointed that they lost any chance at the one pick. I suppose for the Giants, the one pick isn't as important because with Jackson Dart, you have a guy who, is capable and can potentially be your franchise quarterback of the future. But the Giants have tried a little harder to lose this one. Maybe they get Mendoza and then they can trade either Mendoza or Dart for picks. I don't know. They're worth a lot potentially. Seems like they gave up something. If I was a Giants fan, I wouldn't be too happy about them trouncing the Raiders. But yet another one I missed, and that put me at 4-6, falling further into the sub 500 territory. The Raiders just seem like a mess. Heard Max Crosby wants to get out. Some talk, he would be a guy. Apparently, he's a good character guy. Somebody Vrabel would probably love. I don't know if the Pats would be prepared to give away the picks it would take to get Max Crosby, but I wouldn't mind that one bit if they went that direction. It'd be nice to have controllable Max Crosby with the rest of the team. That could make a huge difference. So hope it's something that's at least considered. If I hear we get Max Crosby in the offseason, I'll start thinking like we're building a juggernaut, but we'll see. Might be too expensive. If it's multiple first-round picks, then it might be too rich, especially if it's like several years of first-round picks. But I'll be curious to see if the Pats try to make a play for Max Crosby in the offseason. Meanwhile, the Giants, I don't know who they're going to draft, but they will have a high draft pick, and I think better days are ahead for them. So even though that was a pretty good day, 34-10. Eagles-Bills. I watched this game, and of course there's the whole thing. I mean, this game I think is a great example of how much parity there is in the league. One team from each division that people have refer to as maybe potentially the best in their divisions. Eagles, potentially the best team in the NFC. Bills, potentially the best team in the AFC. A lot of people believe that. That's not what the seeding says, but there's a lot of talent on the Eagles, and then you've got Josh Allen on the Bills, which is the only reason why anyone gives the Bills any chance to win. Him and James Cook, anyway. Not a great game for James Cook. Eagles defense does indeed look very stout. I don't get why the Eagles offense doesn't function. It's kind of like if I was the Eagles, I would fire whoever the offensive coordinator is and get anybody to run the defense otherwise, because it's just, you got Jalen Hurts I'm not a huge Jalen Hurts guy. I think but he's shown he can win. He's won in the Super Bowl. He's certainly capable of performing at least at an adequate level. I think he's at best tier 2 quarterback. He might be. I don't even think he's as good as C.J. Stroud, honestly. But he's maybe lower end of the tier 2 world, and either the lower end of tier 2, upper end of tier 3. Saquon Barkley, 3.6 average. I mean, is their offensive line suck? How does Saquon Barkley only run for a 3.6 average? They must have issues with their offensive line. That's the only thing I could think. A.J. Brown, 68 yards only. Devontae Smith, 25 yards. It just seems like these guys should be better. I don't know. These are names where it might just be I'm going based on names. Let's see. I want to take a look and see how old these guys are, because I can't quite understand why Philadelphia isn't better on offense. Football. We'll go 2025. All right. Let's see. Maybe guys are just getting old. Is that potentially part of it? I'll Go down and see rushing and receiving. Saquon's 28. He's in his prime. AJ Brown 28. He's pretty much in his prime. They've got Dallas Goddard. He's 30. Another weapon guy who I think just set some kind of a record for touchdowns or something. I believe I heard on Devontae Smith, 27 years old. Like what is going on here? Jalen Hurts, we know, 27. I mean, these are good players. These are names that I know. So why do they suck? It just doesn't make sense. Like I said, I don't understand why they're holding on to whoever the offensive coordinator is. They could hire a high school football coach to come on to the Eagles and probably have better results with these names. It makes no sense. I don't know why the Eagles' offense sucks, but if there's anything that's going to keep them from getting anywhere in the playoffs, that's going to be it. Meanwhile, 16 yards. How do you only gain 16 yards in the second half with names like that? It's like whoever's the offensive coordinator is totally out to lunch. How the hell did this guy get a job? On the other side, Josh Allen, 23 of 35, 262, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Not a terrible game except for that last pass. What happened? Real quick, I'll mention they managed to hold James Cook to only 74 yards. I think the Pats did even better than that when we had all of our defenders in. And it was good to see Brandon Cooks have a return to form. I was a fan of him as a Patriot, and he looked good as a Ram. He's getting up there, but nice to see him have a good game. I guess the last thing I could talk about, the Eagles defense, obviously very stout for the first half. Not as good in the second half, but they still held the Bills to 12 points. It's pretty impressive for a team that definitely has offensive capabilities. Isn't special, but with Josh Allen, you expect the Bills to score more than 12 points. The Bills not having a real kicker is kind of a major Achilles heel for them going to the playoffs. Guy missed the extra point. He's the backup. Prater was doing all right for them. I don't know if he's injured or what's going on there, but you'd like to see, as a Bills fan, you've got to be worried. It seems like they haven't had a decent kicker in like 2 or 3 years. It's almost like we were going with that Tyler Bass guy who wasn't particularly one of the better kickers either. It's almost like McDermott doesn't care about having a decent kicker. I don't know. I think they should have been trying a little bit harder to get somebody a little bit better than the options that we've been seeing the last few years. I'd be pretty annoyed with that as a Bills fan. And, the Bills just sort of manufactured drives near the end of that game. I kept thinking, this has got to be the drive that they score on. And it was like they just kept failing and failing. They went for that fourth down. And, you understand why they went for it, but it was just kind of like, I think they left some points on the board and they could have gotten with field goals. And, which I think is never necessarily a great idea, especially in a close game like that, which is mostly a defensive game. Got to hand to the Bills D, I guess, to some extent, even though the Eagles offense sucks. The Bills D probably deserves some credit for holding them only 13 points, stymieing Hurts pretty well. But as far as that last play is concerned, which is what everyone's talking about, I originally told my Bills friends, I'm like, he should have just kicked the extra point and gone to overtime. But, it didn't take me very long before they told me, Josh Allen had a messed up foot, they called the play. I think they just wanted to end it. They didn't want Josh Allen to have to play a whole other quarter. Certainly I think if they went to overtime, they would have had a better chance of winning the game. So I think from a purely kind of like just from a pure strategy, not taking into account the state of Josh Allen, I think, they were less likely to win when they went for the two. But, I guess I sort of understand that the Bills didn't really get a lot of offense going until the very end of that fourth quarter. Maybe they thought they'd have a hard time against the Eagles defense sustaining another drive. And they drew up a good play. And, you wonder, Josh Allen, everyone is all over Josh Allen. He's obviously talented. one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but I don't. You gotta wonder whether he's just like not a guy who can step up in those clutch situations in big games. He should have been able to make that pass. The guy was open. He was kind of walking to the left and backwards, so it was kind of an awkward, direction to be going. I think that's part of the reason. I think he didn't have his feet set properly when he made that throw. I don't know if he had time to get his feet set. He was being pursued. Um, but I was disappointed. I was rooting for the Bills for the sake of seeding. I thought the seeding was better if the Bills won. And it was nice, on one level, it was nice that the Pats could wrap up the division without having to beat the Dolphins, because it's just not a foregone conclusion. But but I was sad for my Bills fans, and I'm just sad for the Bills in general. I don't think they're going anywhere, honestly. My friend tried to downplay this loss. I think it's a pretty big loss. This loss will be the difference between them potentially having, they could have still won the division. I believe they could have won the division. You know, Miami is not going to be an easy out for the Pats. Of course, I said that about the Jets, and they were an easy out, so I could be wrong about that. But the Bills still had a shot at the division. And if they had been able to get home field advantage, that would have been so big for them, a team that really struggles on the road. And you have to wonder whether they're a contender having to play road games in the playoffs, because this was a home game that they did lose, but it was very close. We know that they're better at home than on the road. And I don't know. To me, this, as soon as my initial thought was this, it was a well fought battle between two heavyweights, two teams that could potentially, meet in the Super Bowl. But after this game, you know, seeing the way they were able to control the Bills, and seeing the way Josh Allen failed to come up big in the clutch situation, and thinking about the fact that the Bills had lost any real shot at keeping any kind of home field advantage at all in the playoffs, I think this was a bigger loss than Bills fans would want to acknowledge. This could really be the beginning death, the death knell for the dynasty, for the whatever you want to call it. It's not a dynasty, but for the run the Bills have been on. I think the Bills are in a tricky spot. I don't think they have what it takes. I think they need to make a change in their coach and their GM in order to compete. But that's a scary thing they have to do. Bring in a new guy. They're going to want to change out the whole team. It might take a year of sort of reconfiguring and rebuilding before they become relevant again. But I really don't think the Bills are doing themselves any favors by running back the same mediocrity plus Josh Allen that they've been running for the last 5 or 6 years. Josh Allen's getting to an age where he's too good of a quarterback not to have a title. And if I was the Bills, I'd be done with McDermott. I was done with McDermott 2 years ago. You know, it's time to move on, Bills. If you want to have a chance to be relevant before Josh Allen ages out of contention, you got to get better pieces around him, and this guy is not cutting it. So yeah, I think this spells a rough postseason for the Bills and their fans, and I'm sorry. I really feel bad for my Bills fans friends, but I'm telling you right now, the chances I think the Bills of going all the way have, some people still think that they're one of the best AFC contenders. I feel like this game was going to go a long way to keeping that from being the case. All right, Bears 49ers. Oh, well, last thing I'll say about Philadelphia before I move on is if they can figure out how to make their offense work, they're a dangerous team because their defense is that good. But there's no sign of them turning their offense around, and until I see some of that, they have one game to prove it. I don't think the Eagles are going to repeat. I think someone's going to take them out. It'll be one of those NFC West teams, but we'll see. Probably Seattle. Bears and 49ers. This was a fun game to watch. I also missed this game. I'm going to stop doing the count. I'll just do the count at the end. I picked the 49ers to cover 5.5 points. Of course, they only won by 4. I was right about the 49ers winning. They looked hot offensively. And Brock Purdy, I think Brock Purdy is exceeded my expectations for him at this point. During the Mac Jones time, I heard some people rumbling about, well, maybe they should make Mac Jones a starter, and I kind of thought, I thought maybe they're right. Maybe Mac Jones and Brock Purdy aren't that far apart. And it didn't take long before, after Brock Purdy came back from injury, to prove that he is worlds better as a quarterback than Mac Jones. I was never much of a Mac Jones believer anyway. I think in the early days when he was with the Pats, I tried to believe that he was going to be a guy who would step in for Brady, that the dynasty would just continue with Belichick. I think at that point I really wanted to believe that the dynasty was more about Belichick than Brady, and that somehow it could continue with a new guy. Belichick didn't even like Mac Jones, so even that was naive to think. Um, yeah, Mac Jones just looked completely incapable as a quarterback in the latter years, when largely probably because our offensive coaching was so bad. But he can't. Mac Jones can't get away. If the play doesn't go according to plan, then it's over for Mac Jones. It's either a sack or it's mostly a sack. He has very little mobility. Doesn't have any kind of arm strength or arm talent. It's not like he can't throw the deep ball with any kind of consistency. He's very good. I think Shanahan was good at putting him in situations where he could succeed. But Purdy, on the other hand, I guess I had something of a bias against him. I hadn't seen him play enough to really know how good he was. But watching him in this game, Purdy deserves his money. Purdy's good. For a guy who's Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, I haven't seen a quarterback that good come from that late in the draft since you know who. Our boy, Tommy B. So, you gotta hand it to Purdy, The dude must be a cerebral guy. He seems to work really well with Shanahan's system, and really impressive what the 49ers have been able to do. Their defense, looks like it's lacking the two guys that are out, Fred Warner and Bosa. I recently read that maybe there's a chance that Fred Warner could end up coming back in a limited capacity in the AFC Championship game or in the Super Bowl. So if he came back with any kind of real capability, then the 49ers could be very dangerous, much more than I thought. I think I took it for granted that the 49ers would not be a contender most of this year. And, the run that they've been on, their offenses looked so solid. Shanahan's, pushing all the right buttons and pulling all the strings. And, I still have a hard time seeing them getting past the Seahawks, or the Rams even. But, not as hard of a time seeing them get past it as I did in the past. I mean, the scoring has just been insane. They can't be stopped. And that was a game, I think, where Kittle didn't even play, right? Let's see. I don't think Kittle played in this game. They scored 42 points. I mean, I hear next week their left tackle was out, and he has a hamstring issue. So that's probably the most concerning thing. But there was no Kittle in this game, I don't think, right? Yeah, they had. I mean, they got the ball around. They've got Pearsall back for the first time, and I've been waiting to see this guy play for forever, because it seems like he's been injured more than he's been healthy. And he looked pretty good, 85 yards on 5 receptions. He could be a weapon for them going forward. McCaffrey, another amazing game, having the best season of any non-quarterback, and it's a shame he doesn't get more consideration. He's almost he's bordering on 1,000 yards rushing, and I think he already has 1,000 yards rushing, and he's only 100-something yards away from 1,000 yards receiving, and that's pretty remarkable. It's funny that he doesn't get more consideration. They're so focused on quarterbacks. Brock Purdy, 303 yards, 24 for 33, 3 touchdowns and an interception that came early. If it wasn't for the defense, I'd feel better about if I'd say if Bosa and Nick Bosa and Fred Warner had been healthy, then the 49ers would be that team that we're missing this year, the overwhelming favorite team without a major weakness anywhere. It's only because of that questionable defense, and they didn't look so great against the Bears, although I was impressed with Caleb Williams. But it's only because of that defense that just gave up 38 points to the Bears that makes me think that maybe they don't have what it takes to go all the way. But they're making me more of a believer than I was before. I'd kind of written them off, and they're definitely not write-offable. They actually have a shot to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think the next game against Seattle, next week will be, first of all, extremely exciting, and second of all, tell us a lot about how good the 49ers really are. Bears, meanwhile, I think I saw a side of Caleb Williams that this is probably the best version of Caleb Williams I've ever seen. He's still making a lot of throws from outside the pocket, which I never like. 25 of 42, 330 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think 25 of 42 isn't great as far as completion percentage, but certainly he's shown that he's good enough that the Bears will be a factor in the coming years. I don't think he's anywhere near as good as. I wouldn't even put Caleb Williams in the elite tier necessarily, although he's knocking on the door of the elite tier. I'd put him. I think maybe Caleb Williams is. About the same level as C.J. Stroud, and Caleb Williams just has a lot more weapons. Him and that Loveland guy. Loveland 94 yards. Luther Burden 138 yards. They got pieces here. I think the Bears. I don't think they have what it takes to be champions this year, but they're certainly moving in the right direction. And Ben Johnson obviously knows what he's doing. So. This is a great game to watch, back and forth. It's compared to the Eagles-Bills game, it was, it's like I suppose the talent in the Eagles-Bills game was defensive, and should have been able to appreciate that too. But gotta love watching a shootout between Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy. It was good entertainment, and looking forward to seeing the Bears. I think the Bears will handle the Lions next week. And hold the number 2 seed. But we shall see. I'll talk about that more in next week's preview, as I've been saying. But I lost this one. I did have the 49ers pick to win, and they only won by 4. It was a 5.5 point spread, so that's a loss. Finally, Rams-Falcons. I had assumed the Rams would just trounce the Falcons, but Bijan Robinson had other ideas. I didn't even see this game. I skipped it. It wasn't that I skipped it. I just got distracted watching other things, and I realized that by the time I realized the game was on, I realized it was over, and I thought, I'm sure the Rams must have crushed them anyway. And wouldn't you know it, Falcons come out of nowhere. Falcons, a team with a lot of talent that has terrible coaching, I assume, because otherwise they wouldn't be 7-9. I mean, they are close to a 500 team. You put them in a different division, and they could be like the Tampa Bay or Carolina, and a crappy team that also still doesn't belong in the playoffs. But I knew watching the Pats play them earlier this year, they had talent. You could tell. Drake London is a very good receiver. Bijan Robinson, we owned Bijan in that game, so he didn't seem super intimidating. I think he only had 50-something yards. That just showed how good our rush defense was earlier in the year. That fell off as soon as Milton Williams was gone. But weird that they started playing a lot better with Kirk Cousins back. I thought Kirk Cousins was washed, as the kids say, and he's showing that he's still relevant, at the very least as a backup. He's a starter for now. I don't think that the Falcons would be too wise to run it back with Kirk Cousins as the starter next year. He was only 13 for 20 with 126 yards and a touchdown, so it wasn't like he put him on their back or anything. But there's Bijan Robinson, 195 yards and a touchdown, and this is mostly the Bijan Robinson game. I'd heard a little bit about, meanwhile, Stafford, 3 picks, which is certainly makes him have to make you wonder about whether, I've heard that Drake May has passed him in the MVP race. I don't know if that's true. I feel like one bad game shouldn't necessarily be that much of a difference. Stafford came in this game with a 40-5 touchdown to interception ratio. Now it's 42-8. Yeah, that still looks amazing. Still threw for 269 yards. It wasn't a great game for Stafford. It was a bad game, just like his bad game against the Panthers. But, if a bad game is 22 for 38 for 269 yards, 2 touchdowns, well, the 3 interceptions look pretty bad, but the rest of it, I've seen worse games than that. Kyren Williams, 92 yards. I heard Corum got injured. That's kind of bad. I know he's kind of a big part of the running game, so I don't know how bad his injury is, but that could be a problem for them. Devontae Adams still out. I think when they get him back, that'll make a big difference. Nacua only 47 yards. What happened to the usual Puka game? It didn't happen in this game. But yeah, impressive and unexpected win for the Falcons. I think that the Rams might have let their guard down. This is it's a game. I mean, Falcons were home in the dome, so maybe that made a difference. Rams may have been overlooking them a little bit. My uncle, who's a big Rams fan, talks about how they there was a pass interference that wasn't called in the final quarter. I didn't see that. I saw the Puka Nacua almost catch that was about as much as a wide receiver can control a ball without it officially being a catch. Obviously you could see the ball was moving as he was falling out of bounds. He still seemed like he had pretty good control of the ball, but obviously if the ball's moving, he doesn't have control of it while he's in bounds. So it was a good call in the end there. I guess they did miss a pass interference call. I didn't see that part, so I can't really judge. I only watched the highlights on YouTube. But fun highlights to watch on YouTube at the very least. And Rams put themselves in a bit of a position here. The Rams were looking at potentially they may have lost a seed here, and their opponent is now going to be either the Eagles or the Bears instead of Carolina or Tampa Bay. It was a pretty bad loss here, and as a Rams fan, I don't know. You can't. It's not like the end of the world because the Rams don't need a strong home field advantage, and they're still one of the best teams in the NFC. I'd say they still have a good shot of, especially when Devontae Adams comes back. They have almost as good a shot as anybody I think in the NFC of emerging into the Super Bowl. But they've certainly made the path a lot harder for themselves, and this is the second game, which is kind of a head scratcher game for Stafford, who otherwise looked like an MVP this year. But it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm going to chalk it up to that they underestimated the opponent. His other bad games have been against teams that really aren't that great. It seems like he brings his A game for the teams that matter. And I think whether they're facing Philadelphia or Chicago in the first round, I think Chicago wins, and they likely face Philly, which is probably, I don't think, as favorable a matchup. But I don't know. I feel like the Rams. I feel pretty good about the Rams against the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a little bit scary. Any team with a great defense is a little bit scary. If I was the Rams, I'd rather be playing Chicago than the Eagles. But who knows? The Eagles can't score points. I could see the Rams outscoring them without too much trouble. So I think the Rams could beat any one of these teams, and it probably won't make a huge difference. But still, kind of a head scratcher loss. I really expected them to own the Falcons in this game. It's not the end of the world for them. I think this loss hurts them less than the Bills' loss hurt them. But it's not something you want to see as you're coming down the home stretch. You got to wonder if the team is not as hot as it could be. Falcons, meanwhile, finishing the season respectably, 7-9. It really isn't that bad. They need to probably get a new coach and a new quarterback. Somebody younger. Maybe Malik Willis could go to the Falcons. That would be kind of interesting. I think I said that earlier. Not much else to say. I think that there's a weird thing by which, since the Falcons won this game, if they win next week, even if Carolina loses, they still go in. So, and the Falcons, I think, are playing the Saints next week, which is actually going to be a pretty good game for a couple teams that are already eliminated. Saints have been playing really well with Shuck. Falcons are a team that come and go. That'll be a tough, have a pretty decent record, a better record than the Saints do. That'll be a tough game to predict. I don't even know what I'm going to say, but I'll think about it and come up with an answer for you the next time. But it was a fun game. If you're a Falcons fan, even though your season's over, must have been fun going to see that game because definitely an entertaining game. All right, so let's do the final tally. I got to start doing these predictions. I didn't have time to do the predictions before Christmas, so I don't know what I would have said for Cowboys, Commanders, Lions, Vikings, and Broncos, Chiefs. But the games I did pick, again, I was 1-0 with the Texans, 1-1 with my Packers pick, 2-1 with my Bengals pick. 2-2 with my Steelers pick. Then 3-2 with the Saints. 4-2 with the Jaguars. Then 4-3 with my Bucks pick. 4-4 with my Patriots pick. With my Jets pick, because I said the Jets were going to cover, or that the Patriots wouldn't cover is what I mean to say. So 4-4. We got 4-5. I thought the Panthers would cover. They didn't. Thought the Raiders would cover. 4-6. I picked the Bills to win against the Eagles. It did not happen. 4-7. I think the Bills gave the Eagles 1.5. So that didn't help my cause any. 4-7. I had picked the 49ers to cover. They did not. That's 4-8. And the Rams make it 4-9. So I think last week I was 8-4. This week I'm 4-9. That means I'm, let's see, 8-4. So that's 12, and I'm 12-13 after this week. This week took out any advantage I had. I make these. I don't even know. I honestly hate making the spread picks because, for one, these spreads are so well crafted that if you get anything better than 50-50 on spread picks, you're doing pretty well as far as I'm concerned. Maybe some people are better at it than I am, but to be 12-13 is a little disappointing. I used to be in some football pools with friends that I would do, for shits and giggles. We used to put $5 in or $10 in. It was very little money. Eventually, we just started doing it as a kind of like a gentleman's bet, who could pick the best. And I won a few of those. I was actually pretty good. I feel like I won every other year, so I actually had pretty good numbers at that. But against the spread, I quit gambling on it because I hated losing money on gambling. It's just not for me. I'm not a gambler. There's nothing I can't stand more than losing money on a bad pick and wasting time watching. I don't want to watch games that I don't care about. I don't want to make myself care about more football games. I watch enough football as it is. I don't need to add stuff to it. And I would sort of, cringe and obsess over games that wouldn't have mattered otherwise. So I stopped kind of picking. But I really hate the influence of money in football. It's like I've been parts of fantasy baseball teams. I've never had a fantasy football team. I used to do a lot of football picks, football pools when I was a kid. They were always really innocent, $20 buy-in. It wasn't much. The playoffs I'd do pretty well. I think I'm better at picking games in the playoffs than I am in the regular season. I think, when there's more on the line, you can rely more on your intuition and your judgment a bit. Then during the regular season, a lot of weird stuff happens. A lot of teams win you don't think are going to win. Last year I was in a survivor pool and got down to just me and one other person, and I picked I forget which team it was. It was a team to beat the Titans. I picked somebody to beat the Titans last year, and it was like about almost towards the end of the season, and the Titans lost. The Titans won in a fluke game, and I was pissed. After that, Survivor Pool was one of only two people ended up getting nothing out of it. $40, I got nothing out of it. I decided I pretty much going to stay away from gambling. It generally annoys me. It makes you question the integrity of the game. You wonder who's paid off, I don't need that much extra football influence in my life, so I'm fine not betting on it. If you want to take my advice, good luck. I guess I'm gonna still do the picks for fun. It's kind of a good way to gauge your knowledge of each individual team. So I'll still keep doing the picks, but let me officially state I don't endorse gambling. One of the things I get annoyed with watching modern sports media is that so much of it is so heavily weighted to these DraftKings and FanDuel and these apps that really and these services that are bankrupting people. It's like most people don't win on these things. Most people lose. And why young men think that they can beat the system when it's set up to extract the profit from it. Just like going to the casino, think you can win. Maybe some very small percentage of people win, but for the most part, If you think you're special, you're probably not. So we'll see. I'm 12-13. Looks like I'm not very special at the moment. I'll keep picking to the end of the year. Let's see if I can finish at least in the black. Let's see if I can finish above 500. But I generally condemn gambling in sports. I'd like to see FanDuel and DraftKings and all these gambling apps eliminated. I think it's a sad commentary on our culture that it's allowed to take over sports as much as it has, and I can't stand these pregame shows where people are like, oh, they're sponsored by FanDuel. They're like, make sure you pick this guy for 50 yards and make sure you pick this guy for better than, for 2 touchdowns or more. It's just kind of like, I miss the days when it was just about the game and not about, gambling odds. Gambling odds could be a little bit helpful here and there. But, for a while, the Chiefs were the favorites, to go to the Super Bowl, even after they didn't look so great. And so it just goes to show you, sometimes the gambling odds are way off. And if you bet on the Chiefs this year, well, you're a chump. Just like Nick Wright on First Things First. Just glad to see a Chiefs fan have to eat it for once. Anyway, that's the league review. Looking forward to the final week of the NFL. A lot of great playoff games coming up. I'm hoping my Pats make it beyond a round or two because I'm going to lose a lot of interest in these playoffs, and it'll be hard for me to do these updates if the Pats aren't in it anymore. But that's not to say that I won't still watch and I won't still do my channel. It'll just be, hard to accept the fact that my Pats in a year where there was so much parity, couldn't luck it out to the point. I think it's going to be tough. I think these playoffs are going to be tough. We're looking at a Pats team that's just untested in the playoffs. If there's any reason why I don't have a lot of confidence in the Pats to make it to the Super Bowl, it's because they're inexperienced. But it's a shame in a year where there's so much parity in the league. Hopefully they'll be able to buck the trends. In the past, it seemed like the teams that were inexperienced wouldn't go as often. It's rare to see. I think in the early days of the Chiefs, they were going, or at least getting close to the Super Bowl. So we'll see. Maybe Drake May is so good he could be the guy who bucks the trend of needing experience to succeed in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. But if we even win one playoff game, I'll feel pretty good about the team. I think I'll be disappointed if they lose no matter what, but I won't be shocked if they lose to any team in the AFC because a lot of these teams are pretty evenly matched, and I think the Pats are pretty evenly matched with every team other than I think they should beat the Chargers. Every other team, they could easily lose to any of these other teams. So I'll be happy if they beat the Chargers. That's about what I expect. But yeah, looking forward to Week 18. I'll do a preview of that coming up probably Friday night or Saturday. I guess I should try to make it Friday night because there's games on this Saturday. So yeah, I'll do a Friday preview for you, and make more dumb picks for gambling that no one should do. Not too many. I think there's only a couple of major, as far as teams that get in. I think it's just Tampa, Carolina, and then the Pittsburgh, Baltimore. I think Pittsburgh, Baltimore is already in my mind in. I have no idea what's going to happen with Tampa, Carolina. It seems like Carolina has an edge based on if Atlanta wins, Carolina gets in. Even if they lose, that gives them an edge. But and I could see Atlanta beating New Orleans. But let's see. A lot of good games. Seattle, looking forward to Seattle 49ers. I'll talk more about that on Friday. Hope you enjoyed this. If you like this, leave a comment. Subscribe if you want. It'd be nice if I had somebody subscribed. I don't know if this is if you there's one subscriber right now. Thanks, guy or gal. If you're watching this, I appreciate it. I think you might have liked my thing too. Either that, or you're just trying to scam me and you're trying to figure out how to, leech my information. But I don't know. Hopefully there'll be more subscribers. I haven't really done anything to promote myself. I'm enjoying making these videos, so I'll just keep making them no matter who decides to watch me, who doesn't decide to watch me. But if you do see this and you like it, leave a comment. Please subscribe, because unlike my other channel, I actually do want subscribers on this one. It's a slow start. It's probably going to be a slow start for a while, but I feel like if I keep pumping out these reviews, someday, hopefully, I'll have some kind of a following, even if it's 10 people. But yeah, I don't have much else to say. See you soon. Go Pats.